82% of B2B buyers consume between 5 and 8 pieces of content from the winning vendor that they selected. Okay. So now the question is that content that buyer consumed from the marketing department or from salespeople?
Everything leads to growth with the National Association for Sales Professionals. The Leads to Growth podcast with the National Association for Sales Professionals provides in-depth discussions sharing the best sales, prospecting, influence, and communication skills, as well as sales training techniques to take your professional sales career to the next level.
All right, welcome to another podcast, number 2 in the books here, Leads to Growth for NASP. Christopher McCoy here with Rick Middlemass. And we've got Bernie Borges here. Bernie is the co-founder and CMO of Vengrasso. Vengrasso, I love the way that sounds. The digital sales transformation company. Bernie is the host of the award-winning Social Business Engine podcast with over 200 episodes published. You're a little ahead of us, Bernie. Bernie's career spans 3 decades with a unique background in B2B marketing roles and sales roles. He's founded a leading digital marketing agency, which after 15 years merged with Vengrasso in 2017. Bernie is a frequent speaker at industry events and is the author of Marketing 2.0. He has been recognized by industry peers, including Marketing Insider's 60 Best Marketing Speakers, 50 Social Media Marketing Influencers, and Analytica's Top 100 AI Influencers. I could go on and on, Bernie. You got a nice credentials here, and you've got some great links that I'm going to let you share with at the end here. There's a lot of ways for our audience to follow you, and that's kind of how I ran across you. Your amazing podcast and all your great topics. Welcome to the podcast, Bernie.
Christopher, thanks for having me. Rick, glad to be here. Let's do some podcasting together. What do you say?
Rock and roll. Make it happen. Learning with the expert here. Love it. So today we're going to be talking about why salespeople need content to engage their buyers. And I just love this topic. I'm hearing it a lot of different ways from a lot of different people, but I really loved your perspective on it, Bernie. And before we really get into your awesome tips and strategy, can you kind of set the stage here and speak a little bit about how content for sales is different than content for marketing?
So to start off with, Christopher, when I respond to this question, how is content marketing different than content for sales? Couple of points I want to start with. Number one, I'm a long-time content marketing advocate and practitioner. And I love content marketing. It's fantastic. Again, I'm a long-time practitioner. My own podcast is an example of being a practitioner of providing content. Of course, my podcast, Social Business Engine, serves its purpose in my business, just like this brand new awesome podcast serves its purpose for you guys at NASP. So content marketing generally is really characterized as one-to-many, meaning you're producing a podcast like this, you want it to be consumed by many, many people. Generally, in the context of a marketing team, a marketing organization, content marketing is something that team produces, so again, many people can consume it. And most often, its benefits to the company are around awareness, credibility, and top of the funnel lead generation. Content for sales, on the other hand, is not one-to-many, it's one-to-one. It is a salesperson utilizing a piece of content and connecting with an individual, a prospect, one-to-one, and leveraging the value of that content in a way that's useful, relevant, and helpful to the individual that he or she is sharing it with in order to either start a sales conversation or continue a sales conversation. So I'll pause right there and just say that is, perhaps not too short-winded, that is my distinction between content marketing and content for sales.
Beautiful. So I love the clear distinction that you made in the one-to-one and the one-to-many, as well as also in the timing of the process, right? So marketing content is going to really drive people to us, and then sales content is really for us to take them through that sales process. Now, is there specific content for specific buying places in the cycle, for specific areas in the buying cycle? Are there certain types of content that you'd like to deliver at that time?
So before I answer that question, I do want to add one more thing, not so much to the definition, and I promise I'm going to answer your question, Christopher, but I think it's important that I address the why. Like, why is content for sales even important? Okay. And I'm going to cite one of many statistics, one of many data points that really prove or really are the proof point behind the importance of content for sales. And this is a Forrester Research data point. It's easy to find out there on the interwebs. I can provide a link to it. But basically it says that 82% of B2B buyers consume between 5 and 8 pieces of content from the winning vendor that they selected. Okay. So now the question is that content that buyer consumed from the marketing department or from salespeople? And the answer to that is going to vary, right, from one scenario to the next. So it's that important that both the content marketing team and the individual salespeople be aware of that, so that they can be collaborating on ways to share content with the buyer in order to influence their thinking and their journey. Now, Christopher, you asked, what kind of content, right? There isn't a very black and white answer to that. There's one with kind of shades of gray. And so here's how my thinking on that. When it comes to building awareness around, hey, Mr. Prospect or Ms. Prospect, if you have this pain point, then you should be aware of ways that you can solve it. And our company is a company that can help you with that. So when it comes to just getting on a buyer's radar, building or sharing some content that helps them become aware of the business pain points or the business cost of those pain points, and that there's a solution to that, is one type of content, awareness type of content. That can be thought leadership, it can be white papers, it can be pre-recorded webcasts, pre-recorded videos, etc. So when it comes to awareness, a lot of it is why. Like, why should you be thinking about that, right? When you get down to more of the consideration phase, it should be more about the how. Here's how you solve that problem. And, we're someone that can do that. When you get down to more of the close or the decision phase, it's usually more about use cases, case studies, ROI, total cost of ownership, those kinds of topics that are like bet your job kind of decisions, because sometimes that's what people do, is that they're betting their job on that decision. So you want to give them data and ammunition to allow them to sleep at night, that if they're going to make that decision, that they've got a pretty high degree of probability of succeeding with you, and not the opposite, because then they're going to lose sleep instead of sleep peacefully, right? So you want to help them sleep peacefully and not lose sleep. So generally speaking, I like to say that content is like clothing. It's not one size fits all. You have to know, what size is needed, and size, of course, is a metaphor.
Love that. Sometimes they're betting their job on the purchase. If it's a multi-million-dollar B2B purchase, you kind of put a lot on the line. Reinforces the emotional aspects of the sale. It's great.
Exactly. And Rick, you used the word emotion. Great choice of words, by the way, because in the end, people are buying from people. So even if it's a multi-million-dollar decision, it's people that are talking to each other about all aspects of the decision, and there are emotions involved. And in a decision of that magnitude and that price range, there's going to be a lot of people involved in that decision. It's not a 1 or 2 person decision. It's typically a committee of anywhere from 5 to 20 people, depending on a lot of factors. But it is a committee, and it's different stakeholders, from executive to the technical implementation people in the weeds, and then a whole bunch of other roles and responsibilities in between.
Love that, Bernie.
So to your point, emotion is definitely a factor.
Oh, yeah.
I love that, because, you always hear the saying, the fortune is in the follow-up, right? And, I've seen, and I even heard you discuss, just random acts of follow-up in the past, right? Having just random, hey, how you doing? Or, hey, what's going on? Those emails don't really serve the purpose to add value. And like you said serve a purpose. I thought that was really important. When you're forwarding somebody a follow-up or an email, you want to add value and serve a purpose, right? You want to maintain the relationship. That's part of it. But you also want to add value and serve a purpose. So having content that's aligned with where they are in that buying cycle is beautiful. Now, one question I have for you, is this up to the salespeople to produce all this content, to find all this content? Is it coordinated with the marketing team? How is this curated and put together?
So great question, Christopher. And I'm a firm believer in the mindset and the mantra that where marketing says to sales, and specifically I'm referring to the marketing leader, the head of marketing, says to the head of sales, your number is my number. That mindset of marketing having an ownership stake and skin in the game on making the number is first and foremost a mindset, right? So when that mindset is in place, then marketing and sales can be collaborating on exactly what content the sales team needs. Okay. And we're firm believers at Vengresso that the content that's delivered to sales is actually a form of sales enablement. And there isn't a sales leader on the planet that isn't interested and very passionate about delivering sales enablement capabilities to his or her team, right? So when you start to think of content more like sales enablement and as opposed to marketing, then even that alone is a mindset shift for the sales leader. And they're not thinking it as marketing, because sometimes, let's face it, let's be honest, sometimes sales doesn't view everything that comes out of marketing as something that is valuable or is of interest to them.
Whoa.
Yeah, surprise, surprise, right? So, you mentioned in the intro to me on my bio that I've been around for a few decades. So trust me, I have the scars on my back to prove that statement to be very true. And I'm not alone by any means. So my point is that when sales begins to think of it as sales enablement and marketing begins to think of it as sales enablement, then they can collaborate on how to actually produce that content, but also how to curate that content. It doesn't all have to be, in fact, it shouldn't all come from the vendor. It should also be third-party content. And by third party, I mean authoritative third party, whether it's a research organization or a news outlet, that's published an article. That could absolutely be public domain content, but just because it's public domain doesn't mean that your prospect has seen it. So equipping your salespeople with articles and case studies and research reports and ROI calculators and all these things that salespeople can use, and they can pick and choose when to use it. They should also be given some guidelines and some training so that they can maximize their effectiveness with it. But then there's also an element of it, and I'm kind of answering two questions here, Christopher. There's also an element of the content that should be what we call vaulted. Okay. In fact, if you look up the term vaulted content, you'll start to see Vengresso associated with that. We're producing more around that. And the idea behind that is that you put content back behind some kind of a gate inside of your company and make that available to your sales team and make it available to them in a way that they can access it as they need to, again, with the proper guidance and training. But as opposed to just all the content that's on your website, the blog, all the resources, the webcasts and the white papers and all those things that are out there. Hey, that's great stuff. Love it, love it, love it. But if you allocate some content that's behind some kind of a vault for the salespeople to access selectively, then you put the salespeople in control of when they can use that content, how, again, give them training and guidance on how to use it. And it gives the salespeople a strong sense of being more in control of what content they choose to use with the prospects that they want to engage with.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I heard you, I was listening to one of your previous podcasts on this very topic with Mario, your CEO, who we'll be having on the podcast here in the coming months. And you guys spoke about pillars and clusters. Is this around that same topic with the vaulted content? Are these two principles aligned there? Or
so pillars and clusters refers to how you organize content, and whether you organize pillar and cluster content, and of course I'll explain what that means. Whether you organize it that way on your public-facing content, meaning your website, and or organize it that way, back behind some vaulted content. Those are just decisions that you make. But
Okay.
basically the idea behind pillars and clusters is think of it as chapters and subchapters. A pillar is a big theme, right? So, for example, a pillar might be something associated with financial return on your investment, right?
Mhm.
And then cluster topics can be finance around to the company, to the employees, to the marketplace. You start breaking it down. So you take a big topic and then you slice it up into smaller topics, and you create content on the big topic, the pillar topic, right? And on public facing content, you create, say, a menu item for that. And then the cluster topic are the subtopics, and you create individual pages underneath that, so that you're accomplishing a few things. Number one, you're giving Google lots of content that they can consume and give you authority for, so you can potentially rank well for it, as well as attract inbound links. But you also create a good visitor experience. So when people are on your website, you make it real easy for them to navigate your website, because you've structured, you've organized your content using that pillar and cluster model
That makes sense.
in a way that's really helpful to the visitor, and it's just really easy for them. So
That
that's
makes a
the
lot of
idea
sense.
behind pillar cluster.
Sorry to get you off topic there, but I heard that and I was like, I got to ask Bernie more about that. That was an interesting topic there. All right, Bernie, I'm really loving this. So you've seen now, you being a marketing company, you're supporting a lot of companies and doing. I love marketing companies who are executing marketing about marketing. It's just a crazy concept, but I love the work that you guys are doing. Is there any cool creative pieces or topics that you've seen sales teams put out there? Anything unusual or fun to come to mind? Content can get pretty monotonous out there. You can only get forwarded an article so many times before you're okay. Got anything else for me?
So I'm actually on that question, Christopher. I'm going to share, if I may,
You may.
something that we did at Vingresso, because I think it's important that you demonstrate that you actually do this stuff, and not just show it
Bernie,
to
that's
other
one point that
companies.
I want to make, is that you guys practice what you preach, walk the walk, whatever saying that you want to come out there with is very impressive. So just, you can listen to a lot of people market, but you can also model people. And what you guys do over at Vingresso is very impressive. So thank you for mentioning that.
Well, thank you, Christopher. I appreciate that. Certainly enjoy the kudos. So thanks for that. Um, so about a month ago, we delivered a webinar, and we partnered with another organization to deliver this webinar. So when we were planning the webinar and we came up with the topic for the webinar, we were thinking through the marketing program behind it, the content and the marketing strategy behind it, and how can we do it at the one-to-many level, and how can we do it at the one-to-one level. We came up with a creative concept of actually taking the two people on the webinar. So from our company, that was going to be Mario, our CEO, and then an executive from the other company that we were doing the webinar with. So instead of just saying, here's the topic, here's the two speakers, here's their credentials, which we thought was, that's kind of ho-hum. Everybody does that. Instead, we took a boxing match approach. And what we did was we said, here's the two, in this case, two guys, right? And we're going to put them in the ring, and they're going to duke it out on this topic.
In this corner, we've got...
Exactly. So in order to get to that, each of the two speakers, Mario and the gentleman at the other company, created a video, and they published that video on LinkedIn. And in that video, they stated their position on the topic, and they called out the other guy. Okay. Now, look, the language was clean, and it was all, clean and ethical. It was family friendly, but it was nonetheless, Mario was calling out the other guy, and the other guy was calling out Mario, like, point, counterpoint, going back and forth, like, here's why I'm right, and then listing all the data points, and the other guy saying, here's why you're wrong and why I'm right, and so it became this big, kind of battle between the two of them on videos that they published on LinkedIn. So first and foremost, the videos got 55,000 and 30,000 views respectively. Now, the 55,000 views went to Mario, and 30,000 to the gentleman at the other company, which is pretty significant, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
And we're
heavy.
talking LinkedIn here now. We're not talking YouTube. We're talking views, video views on LinkedIn,
Yeah, that's
right?
impressive.
And then each post got about 300 comments, and I forget how many likes, a couple hundred likes and all that. And when we looked up the analytics using the third-party tool, the total reach for both of them exceeded 300,000 people that it reached.
Wow.
And we took that content and we sliced it up into smaller components, and we gave it to our respective team members, and then they went out and did one-to-many by posting to LinkedIn saying, hey, check this out, as well as individually inviting people that they wanted to come to the webinar, using that as content to individually invite the people. We had 1,500 people register for the webinar, and we had half that many attend.
That's strong.
So that's an example of both content and content for sales and doing something creative that was very effective.
I love that.
Nice.
I really do. I can see it too. The whole in this corner, and then the
and actually on the
rap
day of the
battle,
webinar,
right?
it actually was that. We kept the theme going.
Nice.
Like they both came to the event. They were on video, like Zoom here, and they came to the event with their capes on.
I love it.
A
And I bet you really get a ton of engagement from the audience with that fun stuff too, right?
Yeah,
Especially
absolutely. And then of course, we delivered content around it, right? We just stayed with that theme in order to I look at that as taking a chapter out of B2C. B2C often does kind of the crazy, kooky, creative things, right? And I think we in B2B need to be thinking more creatively and out of the box, and having some fun with our marketing and having some fun with anything we do in business, because at the end of the day, it's people doing business with people, and we all have emotions and we all like to laugh. And so anytime you can combine humor with valuable content that's truly, truly valuable, it's a winning formula.
Love that. Beautiful stuff. Great share. That was a great example. A couple more questions here, Bernie. Where do you see the most common mistakes being made out here? And I imagine you see a lot of unaligned content. I imagine you see a lot of maybe pressure, salespeople reaching out, maybe salespeople reaching out with content only about themselves. Hey, check me out. What are some of the common mistakes people are making in this area of sales for content, or content for sales?
Yeah. First of all, the most common issue is the lack of the mindset that this is sales enablement. And if they're thinking that way, both the marketing team, sales leadership, and even the salesperson, then they're much more likely to change their behavior. And the behavior that really needs to change is it really needs to be about helping the buyer. Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that is most commonly overlooked by salespeople is that the buyer, the B2B buyer, is under a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. Rick, you mentioned earlier, if someone makes a bad decision on a multi-million-dollar deal, that's a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not a single meaning a decision made by one person, but made by a team of people, that's still a lot of pressure. Yeah. And in most cases, it's a project that they're working on, and in most cases, it's one of many projects they're working on. So if the salesperson can just have a true understanding of how much pressure their buyer's under, and seek to try to understand ways that they can truly help that person, and really understand that they're a real human being, they have real needs, beyond just this immediate project here, and just try to connect with people as people. And in the context of this discussion here, content, using content to create sales conversations, then seek to find and share content that is truly valuable and helpful to your buyer. And then use that as a way to actually start conversations that are meaningful. And to the extent that you can expand those conversations beyond just the business topic, but just try to make a real connection with the people, human to human. And if the content you share can be one step toward making that human connection, then that can be, hugely effective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And question in line with that. If you've got, salespeople on the sales team who are like, listen, I don't have time for this content stuff. I need to be calling, I need to be making sales. and all my time is valuable to sell. What do you say to those salespeople, and how do you get them a little more engaged in some of the content creation process?
Great question.
So I ask, how's that working for you?
I knew that.
What percentage of the dials that you make are you actually connecting and having real conversations?
That's beautiful.
Again, the data point that I shared earlier that 82% of B2B buyers select or consume 5 to 8 pieces of content from the winning vendor. So you've got to break through all that noise. So the person who says that they don't have time, either they haven't tried it, or maybe they're not in an organization where leadership acknowledges the importance of enabling them to use content in a way to break through all the clutter and make meaningful connections. So maybe it's a leadership problem and not the individual, right?
Sounds like a culture problem.
But I often say, if you're going to watch a movie at home, you could slap a VHS cassette into a VCR. You could do that, but most people don't. Most people open up some app and watch a movie on demand, right? That's just where we are in the evolution of technology in that example and how we watch movies. Well, in B2B sales, you could make 100 calls a day. You could. However, the likelihood of you being as successful with that approach as you are with sharing relevant content with the people that you need to connect with and then using that as a bridge to conversations is just the more contemporary way of doing it, because B2B buyers who are stressed out and need information, they need that. We say at Vengresso, the modern buyer needs a modern seller.
Mm-hmm.
And listen to what I just said. The modern buyer needs a modern seller. What they don't need is the guy or gal that's cold calling or emailing them all the time. They need a seller who's going to help them relieve some of that pressure that they're under. That's what the modern buyer needs.
I think that was a mic drop bell for you
ding.
right there. Time to go to battle, I think. That's so true. Bernie, I love that. I love where you come from. You're so aligned. And, we talk often about the old world of sales, the scarcity mindset, the high pressure, that world is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And those still trying to fight and hold on to something, of the old are going to miss all the opportunity that's coming to us. And one thing you said as well, too, that I think we don't have the mindset to listen to the needs of our buyer, right? You mentioned they're making a lot more decisions than just buying your product. They're making a decision whether it's going to help them in their career, is it going to help their company? There's so many different needs that go through that process that if you're not actively listening to your buyers and spending time to ask the proper questions and building those relationships, you're not going to have anything. And that stat you dropped was amazing. Most people aren't putting out 5 to 8% or 5 to 8 pieces of content. They're not even getting a chance to swing at that ball game, And so, love what you shared here, Bernie, and a lot of value and a lot of alignment with what we're doing. Before we wrap up here, I've got one more little fun question that we like to ask.
Could I ask one quick clarification question?
Yeah.
So, because you hear this a lot. The modern buyer used to see, or buyers in general used to see, 5 to 10 pieces of marketing content, and then it's 20, and then it's 30, and then it's upwards and onwards. But what you said here was consuming 5 to 8 pieces of content. That means engaging with and reading content versus just having exposure to it. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
That is right. That is right. And let me share even another stat here, and that is that 59% of executives would rather watch a video than read something. So to the extent that in sales, we can provide video content to our buyer. Now, we're not always selling to an executive, because a buying committee sometimes, well, not sometimes, is usually made up of many different roles. But at some point, we are selling to an executive. So we know that executives would rather watch a video, by and large, than read something. And when video content is remarkable And by remarkable, I mean that they're willing to actually share it with others and remark on it. Like take that video and forward it to somebody on their team and say, hey, did you think about this? Or whatever, like whatever they say about it, right? But they've got to be thinking, we've got to be thinking in terms of addressing all the people on the buying committee and breaking through that clutter. So I'm not sure if I responded to your question specifically, Rick. So give it back to me if I didn't.
No, you did. I mean, it's one thing to just see a name, see a logo, and it's another thing to engage with a video, remarkable, long enough that you're saying, wow, this is valuable information, and sharing it with the buying committee. So great notes to keep in mind.
I think you're talking a lot about too, like the difference between actually consuming content and just having an impression or a marketing impression, right, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And a great explanation there, Bernie. Yeah, I love that too. Like, it's not just about putting out content. Our CMO tells us all the time, like, no, don't just put out content. Only great content is all we want. Only great content, so you got to have, and I like remarkable. They've got to be able to remark on it, right? They got to make some comments. That's beautiful. Bernie, really loving this. And I want to wrap up with a little fun question here. We at NASP believe sales and influence isn't just something that happens in business, right? It's something that you take with you everywhere you go. Sales and influence is happening in the operations world. It's happening, in the service industry, in the customer service side. It's happening everywhere. People, whether you have an idea that you're trying to sell, or whether you want to go to lunch somewhere special, or whether you want to have happy hour cocktails at a certain location, like everybody's got some sales and influence in them in their personal lives. And so we'd love to hear an example of when you've used these great sales and influence skills you have in your personal life and how it served you.
In my personal life, I'll give one example, maybe two examples. So my daughter is a sports journalist in New York City. She works for a major sports franchise. And back in her high school years, I was sort of trying to inspire her by making sure she understood what I was doing with content. And I guess it was influential because she went on to major in sports journalism in college. And I even told her that while in college, I said, your career doesn't start when you graduate. Your career starts in college. So she did a bunch of sports journalism work in college, unpaid, but nonetheless relevant work. It even landed her 2 spots on ESPNU, which is, the college version of ESPN, where they invited her. She went to Florida State University, and they invited her in to comment on one of the championship games that Florida State University was playing in. And so she did so well, they said, come back at the 3:00 segment so we can do it again. Right.
Very cool.
And, as she graduated, she had a job immediately. And like I said, she's, gainfully employed for a major sports franchise now in New York. And so I think that my influence on her by sharing my content and my belief in how content, can be produced and create results had an impact on her. And so since your question, Christopher, was in my personal life, that's my daughter, right? It wasn't a business objective. I was just trying to be influential to her, and I think it had some influence.
Absolutely. And I would dare say that you were more influential when you weren't talking directly to her about content marketing, that just seeing you, the way you live, the way you carry yourself, the people that you help, how much you enjoy and love your job. I can imagine that was probably just as influential as the words. So great share. Beautiful. Now she's still, you said she's still in New York City?
She is, yeah.
That's awesome, man. Very cool. Very cool. Now you got me guessing. Well, fantastic. So one more last closing question, Bernie. Where can our audience go from here to learn more from you and Vengreso?
Sure. Well, certainly our website, vengreso.com. It's kind of like a coffee drink, right? VNGRESO.com. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm Bernie Borges on both LinkedIn and Twitter. I do ask for anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn, send a little personal note. Tell me how much you might have enjoyed this podcast with Christopher on Rick here at NASP, and let's connect.
Awesome. Great stuff, guys. Rick, good to see you, buddy. Get well. And Bernie, man, it was a pleasure. We're definitely going to do this again soon.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right,
Thank you,
cheers.
Bernie.
Let's Leads to Growth. We'll see you again soon.